Welcome back to the Royal Palace podcast. On our last episode, we talked about the first round of the French municipal elections, and today we're talking about the second round, which happened on March 22nd. And here to talk about it with us is returning guest Marlon. Marlon is a Paris-based journalist and the co-host of the podcast Flep24. If you enjoy this episode, please consider going to royalpalacemedia.com and subscribing to our free newsletter. And also, of course, make sure to go listen to Marlon and Ollie's coverage of French politics on the French legislative election podcast, Flep24.
I've ordered every federal agency to eliminate rules that don't make sense.
It's the usual French talk, stall and surrender.
All scientists dying of cultural hold the Americans have given us then was very easy. Our planet great again.
Well, for me, it's been really good because the city where I work has gone to the left, and we're hoping that means like a new chapter in the way employees of the city are treated, and as well as my department, Saint-Denis, which has gone overwhelmingly left, at least where it counts. And it also means because we're part of something called Plein Commune, which is like a établissement public territorial. It's basically like a way of regrouping different competencies, like trash pickup, for example, levels that, or different like administrative bodies that serve to like 1,000 communes, 35,000 And so cities. Because Saint-Denis, as we talked about last week, went to La France Insoumise PCF, that means that with the other, like that Plein Commune has a lot of like left seats in it now. And since my city also went left, that means that there'll be more seats for the left. So that's a huge victory in my department.
What's your overall take on how it went down, Marlon?
Yeah, we finally got the results in the big cities, like Patrick mentioned. There's 34,874 communes in France. But in most of them, actually, there was only one list of candidates running. 23,682 of them had a single candidate list, which so they were elected immediately in the first round. Most of those are communes under, I think the level they do is 1,000 people. So very small.
And probably the majority of those are much smaller than that, like a dozen people.
And so now we have Paris. We have the results in Paris. We have the results in Lyon. We have the results in Marseille. And those were all cities where it seemed like the right was going to win. I always say, I say this, I've done one podcast about the results. And it was after the first round of the election, so this is my first time really saying, but even though the left won in places, it's not a huge win for the left. Like the right definitely made gains, but also it's a big loss for the right. They lost Paris, they lost Marseille, they lost Lyon. Paris, they were crushed, and they lost by, the left combined got 60% of the vote between the list of the Union of the Left, led by Emmanuel Gregoire, the Socialist Party inheritor of the current mayor in Hidalgo. And as we're talking now, she is still the mayor. The municipal councils will elect their new mayors on Sunday. Right now, it's the 25th, so it's Wednesday. So all the mayors are currently still in place. In Marseille, the National Rally came in second, and they came a close second. They got over 30% of the vote. And the left list there, led by Benoît Payan, they call themselves Printemps Marseille, Marseille Spring, kind of like Arab Spring, I guess. They also won pretty definitively against the RN opponent, thanks in no small part due to the fact that the RN candidate, or rather the LFI candidate, look at me there, the LFI candidate, Sébastien Delegou, stepped down. He didn't run his list out of the fear of them winning. And then Lyon, it was razor thin. I don't know, do you actually have the numbers in front of you? I didn't write down Lyon.
Yeah. 50.67%, the left candidate.
The green candidate, Doucet.
When it is that razor thin, what is interesting is you can contest the election, and people often do. And like usually like there's no utility in contesting an election because 9 times out of 10, the judge says, Yeah, they broke the law. Because there's like a lot of very like nitpicky things in French election law. Like you can't hang posters, for example, outside of designated areas. But what happens all the time is people do hang posters in undesignated areas. And so often for like things like, so everyone always breaks the law, generally. But the question is like, did it have an impact on the election? So when it's razor thin like that, the judge always, or when it's not razor thin like that, the judge always goes, yeah, they broke the law, but it didn't matter. But with something like this, they could try and challenge it.
But yeah, it's a margin of less than 3,000 votes in an election that over 200,000 people participated in. So that's super close. But Marlon, you said the right lost all those 3 cities, but they didn't have them to begin with, right? You just mean they were hoping they could.
And it seemed after the first round that they had a good chance, in Marseille when they came so close. In Paris, where it seemed like all the stars were aligned for Rachida Dati, the candidate of the Conservatives and, of course, of Emmanuel Macron, to win. Macron was really pushing for Dati to win. She was culture minister under two governments under him, and he aligned his party Renaissance behind her. He personally called Edouard Philippe, his former prime minister, the head of the party Horizons, to tell his candidate, Pierre-Yves Bournazel, to fuse with Dati's list, which he did. He did fuse with Dati's list at the city level, not always at the arrondissement level, because there's those 2 different types of elections in big cities like Paris.
For the first time this year.
Tell me about that, because you know more about this PLM reform.
Yeah, so back in the day, the way it worked is you voted like in your arrondissement for who you wanted, like for the mayorship. And then that is how you determine, you by corollary, use that to indirectly elect the council. So if everyone in your arrondissement voted LFI, like the majority voted LFI, then the mayor of your arrondissement is LFI. But that's only up until this year, where the law changed, and now there's 2 elections that you vote for. So you directly elect your arrondissement, and you directly elect the Paris mayor. But it did mean there was two ballot boxes this year.
And that was a reform that affected Paris, Lyon, and Marseille. It was this PLM law. And honestly, the conventional thinking was that it would help Rachida Dati, which is why it was passed in 2025. Because the thinking was, well, it also reduced the prime de majorité,
which to 25% down from 50%, and it remains 50% everywhere else.
Which we got wrong in FLEP 24 when we were discussing the first round, but Patrick pointed that out to us. But in theory, that reduces an overwhelming majority, except it kind of produced the opposite effect because of the fact that there were 2 different lists. It produced a lot of vote splitting, where in Paris, in particular, a lot of voters who maybe voted for LFI at the local level, or even voted for a candidate of the right and had supported Bournazel, subsequently voted for Grégoire on the LFI voters, because they were worried that the left would lose, that Dati would put this agenda, of the far right. She was also supported indirectly through Sarah Canafo, Eric Zemmour's candidate, who got 10% of the vote in the first round, dropping out and throwing her support behind Dati.
And the LFI candidate was Shikaru. I was watching the debate. She was accusing, I think Grégoire was as well. They were accusing Dati of having made some secret pact with Canafo, which Dati, for Canafo to drop out, which Dati, says isn't true, but seems pretty likely that there was some behind the scenes agreement there.
It doesn't matter whether or not there was. I mean, in effect, they're for the same policies, generally speaking. But you mentioned
true,
something.
But it is Reconquête is so extreme.
Yeah, they're real nuts. But something you mentioned, Marlon, on your podcast that totally just went above my head. I just totally forgot this a thing. But Sarah Nafu is the partner of Eric Zemmour.
Really? I did not know that.
So you wouldn't think that because he looks like he could be her grandfather. He's literally double her age. but also he just doesn't seem like the kind of guy who anyone would really want to talk to.
She also dated Louis Sarkozy at one point back in the day.
Really?
The son of Nicolas Sarkozy, who he also ran in the municipal elections, but came in like 4th, I think, in Menton.
Good point. I want us to talk about I want us to finish on the Paris elections, but I do think it is worth noting that Louis Sarkozy, Nicolas Sarkozy, the former president and convicted, but on appeal, so who knows, innocent till proven guilty, former president of France, his son tried to take the mayorship of this city called Menton, and fortunately he lost. Unfortunately, the far right won. And
he called for an alliance against the far right. But
he's really awful, by the way. Like he is like because he's Sarkozy's son, he gets like a weekly appearance on morning like news broadcasts.
He's a very libertarian type. He has like a Deuce Volt style tattoo. He writes books in English about Napoleon. And he has an open invitation to Flip 24 whenever he wants. I just never actually made any effort to get in touch with him.
I want to point out we shouldn't give him too much credit for calling for an alliance against the far right because it's
he is right wing.
But also like down there, it's like it's another world. Like I'm looking at the first round results there.
Where is it in the south?
Yeah, it's like right on Monaco. The border with. Yeah, no, it's east of Monaco. It's right on the border with Italy. Yeah, in the Côte d'Azur, which is the Côte d'Azur. Everywhere there is like super super right. So in Menton, Sarkozy came 3rd in the first round, but the most left wing candidate, like the who is an ecologist, came 5th with 9% of the vote. The first 4 were far right, normal right, then Sarkozy, then some other right wing guy, and then
Louis Sarkozy is really for reopening brothels in Paris for some reason.
What about Menton?
He's also maybe he would have won if he'd ran on that. He's also like against speed limits and stuff. He's like those types of libertarian policies, and he wants shooting licenses.
He's also married to a Russian lady. I think they speak in English to each other. And there's this awful clip you guys can find online about his life with Sarkozy, and he's just like showing you his family's dog, their bedroom for some reason, and he talks about how much he loves boxing and how much that like really brings him value. But this guy just never shuts up. He just talks and talks
and he's always welcome to talk to me. But yeah, that RN LR porosity like that you mentioned, where there may have been a secret deal between Knafo and Sarkozy. He used to date Knafo. We talked about it on the episode that we did after the first round and the flap. Here's like just some examples. Aurélie Assouline, who was the adjoint mayor in the 17th adjoint in the 17th arrondissement.
So this is a deputy mayor, guys.
Yep. She was given the head of Knafo's list in the 17th, and 17th was governed by the LR. Astrid Renault, who was chief of staff for the LR mayor of the 16th arrondissement, she also on a Knafo list. Lola Cardili is a parliamentary assistant to Agnes Evren, who is the head of the LR Federation for Paris on Knafo's list. Clotilde, classic name, Derorard and Anessa Lahuasa, both in the 15th. LR got figures who joined Knafo's list. And for her part, Dati put Antoine Beauquier 36th on her list, and Beauquier was Zemmour's attorney.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like they made a deal.
and as we said on our episode in the first round, you see like way more willingness for these far right people, or for the normal right, the Macroniste right, like Dati, to work with these far right people than you see from the socialists to work with LFI, at least in Paris.
Yeah, and so in the second round, the result that this produced was out of this, I think, fear of the right winning in this combination with Dati is 52.4% of LFI's voters voted for Grégoire, the socialist candidate, and 46.3% of Bournazel's voters also voted for Grégoire. Grégoire gained 118,450 votes in the second round. Dati gained 144,212. And Chikaru, the France Insoumise candidate, lost 28,087 votes. And she actually lost votes in every single arrondissement between the first and the second rounds. But, this vote splitting that we were mentioning, here's a great example of it. In the 18th arrondissement, left-wing lists won 65.8% of the vote in the first round. So that broke down to Grégoire, 60.74% of the vote, 39,939 votes. Daddy, 27.43. I've written 27.43 as the vote total, so that's wrong, but 27.43. Chicot, 11.83% of the vote, 7,718 votes. But on the arrondissement level, the PS candidate got 43.8%, and the LFI candidate, Daniele Bono, got 24.7% of the vote. So, yeah, a lot of vote splitting, and the result is, unfortunately for LFI, that they only got like 8% of the vote at the, I keep saying national, I mean the city level, in the city level vote. But that gives them 9 councillors on the
it still
Council
matters.
of Paris.
Yeah, and the council, I saw this pointed out, the Council of Paris will now have more, or the 3 parties left of the PS will now have more seats in the PS, which could, in theory, make a difference if the communists and the Greens were willing to break with the socialists on any vote and vote with LFI instead, which is probably unlikely, but interesting because it very much wasn't the case under the previous city hall. But I wonder. So what you're saying here with this vote splitting thing is that, do you think Dati was harmed by this perceived association with CNAFO on the far right? Do you think there were a significant number of right-wing Paris voters who voted for Grégoire instead of her because they were freaked out by this?
I think it was the sort of the Macron votes, which is Bournazel,
you think these people care about that?
Yeah, at least
they do still have a red line there.
At least 46.3% of them. Now, there could be all other sorts of reasons. Daddy is under investigation for corruption. She's going to be judged on that in September, I think, for the allegations about influence and lobbying for Renault. There's also the jewels, which I guess will be looked into at some point. This idea that she did not declare gifts of jewels. She claims it was an ex-lover of hers that gave her the jewels, and that now she's leaking it to the press because he's upset with her, which is a very Parisian story, no doubt. But
she's also what a great defense. No, it was illegal, but
it's just a spurned lover. Yeah. Which may get her off. So, that does seem like it, because in those arrondissements where the right-wing candidates or the right-wing electorate voted for Grégoire, they still elected conservative mayors. For instance, in the 5th arrondissement, a Horizons candidate won. That's Edouard Philippe's party again. Mediapart calculated a swing of around 5,000 voters between the right candidate and Grégoire. In the 19th arrondissement, the incumbent mayor supported Daddy and was re-elected, but Grégoire won by about 3,000 votes, or 10 percentage points, which could mean around 4,000 voters made the choice to arbitrage, their votes. So that electorate does seem to be willing to support a center-left Grégoire to instead of maybe an even further right Daddy.
Liam, you said you saw the debate, right?
I watched part of it, then I got bored.
Yeah, I just had it on in the background. How about you, Marlon?
I was at Mélenchon's speech that night, so I did not see it. I watched some clips later.
Yeah, well, one of the topics that came up that was kind of awkward, just the way it was handled, I think, was the whole scandal with the after school activities assistants, or the people who run the after school or who do the after school activities.
That seemed to be the main thing anyone was interested in talking about.
Well, it's a pretty big scandal. I mean,
I don't know about what is the deal with that. 53
in the last 3 years. 53 after school activity professionals. I'm looking for the words in English. Are either accused or have found to have committed sexual acts on minors, on the people that they're in charge of watching. And there's a lot of reasons for it. And one of the things that Shikara brings up is that the unions have been denouncing that there's not enough people, but also that there's not always 2 there's not enough staff to have 2 adults in the room with kids. So, of course, if you have one guy who's a pedophile, you can kind of get away with a lot if there's no one to also be there. And so this is kind of blown up in different ways. On the right, of course, their accusation is that somehow the left has known that there's like a secret pedophile ring going on. I mean, that's the implication they make, at least. And that like Hidalgo, who's from the same party as Gregoire, and Gregoire was for a while her first deputy mayor, knew about it and did nothing or didn't do enough to protect the children. But of course, on the left, from Shikaru, there's the accusation that you guys have been ignoring all the unions, saying that there's serious problems here, and you haven't done enough. And then, of course, and totally not in political instrumentalization of his part, Gregoire during the debate brings up the fact that he himself was abused as a child in an after-school activity, specifically at swimming, like at the pool or whatever. And one of the things is, of course, like, I think he should, depends on the circumstances, but just political strategy here. Like, I don't think he should have brought that up, because like the obvious like retort was, so isn't that even more scandalous that it happened to you and you did nothing? And one of his defenses is that Paris is not off. Like when you do 53, when you have 53 cases like this for the city the size of Paris, it's actually not far from the national average.
Yeah, I heard him say that which does sound. No, I think what if I remember the debate correctly, Dati had brought that up, that he'd said that when it was brought up in the Paris City Council.
Yeah, that's right.
Which, like, I mean, you get his point, but you definitely don't want to be saying that. That sounds really bad. Like,
well, one thing Gregoire was supposedly very upset with Shikaro about was campaign posters that LFI had used, saying like something like Gregoire or the bilan, the record of the current, majority is 53, abuse, 1 child dead, etc. He was supposedly very personally upset by that because of his personal experience, which may have influenced his decision to not at all fuse with Shikaro in the second round. That's the story they put out to the press.
Yeah, of course. I think the real story is the PS knows that it's getting eaten alive by LFI, and they won't allow that to happen in Paris.
And I guess they were right that they could win without that end handily.
Yeah, but there was the telegenic moment after Gregoire was elected. He hopped on a Vélib and biked from La Rotonde in Stalingrad, where the campaign party was, all the way to Hotel de Ville, and met with Anne Hidalgo. That great image broadcast all across the world. Apparently, now this is just from people posting on Twitter, so who knows if it's true, but apparently they had a guy standing out front of the Vélib stand to reserve the bikes so that there'd be enough fully charged bikes available for the mayor when he came out, because sometimes there are not fully charged or functional bikes on the Vélib stands.
And let us not forget that the destruction of Vélib happened under this socialist municipality under Anne Hidalgo.
Now, I don't know this story.
You probably don't know it because you weren't here before Vélib got destroyed. But there once was a service called Vélib, and it was given to the mega advertising corporation, the contract, JC Daco.
But they do it all around the world for some reason. This is like a huge business of theirs because they get paid by the JC Deco.
Yeah, and
paid
so
by the advertisements.
Some of this stuff is no longer allowed because basically it was found that like basically they come to you with what seems like a good deal. For example, this was true with the bus stops. They said, "Hey, we'll build you guys bus stops for free," and the city goes, "Wow, free bus stops." The backside of it is that they get to use the bus stops for advertising. But of course, what was found is that they make so much fucking money from the advertising that it was actually like obviously not free, and in fact constituted an abandon of like profits for the city. Anyway, but for Velib, they allowed a company that should not have been rewarded the contract, that was totally unprepared to do it, to win the contract. And that meant that like they messed everything up, and Velib was completely not functional basically for an entire summer.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who did the electric bikes, and they never freaking work, and the informatics got all worse. It's so horrible.
It's okay. It's okay now. Like it's probably back. It's probably back to what it was, but I'd forgotten about that. When was that? 2017 or 2018 or so? I remember that. It was such a headache because they had all these stations, and then they because there was a new company, the size of the bikes changed. The stations were proprietary. So everything changed. So suddenly, like, all the stations were shut down. The number of bikes plummeted, and it took them years to get back up to what it had been before. That was really
and all
annoying.
This was to do like electric bikes and a rebrand, basically. Yeah, this company, and also the company, I think, like, kind of threatened the city to get like more money to do I don't remember all the details, but it was a wild scandal. And this also happened at the same time as Autolib, which you probably also don't remember, Marlon.
I remember that actually.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
So they were like, hey, isn't it great to rent bikes around the city? Wouldn't it be great if we did that with cars? It was a terrible idea. And eventually the company just went bust.
It was charging stations everywhere.
No. They were cars.
Really?
They were originally. Then they changed them to charging stations.
It was literally Velib for cars. Like, it was literally like a bicycle rental system for cars. It was the same exact logic. And as you can imagine, the station problem is that times 12 when you have...
Yeah. I think there was a bit of a scandal with that, if I'm remembering correctly, that I believe those cars were made by Bolloré, and that Bolloré also had the contract to like exploit it, and so it worked out very well for Bolloré, and then they dropped out of the contract, and the company that was running it went bankrupt, and they left the city with a huge with the bill basically.
Well, yeah, Yannick Bolloré, he think he's the CEO of Havas, which is owned by JC Decaux. Something like that. Or they have a controlling interest in Havas or something like that. Havas Media Group Communication.
Yeah,
which is...
They basically have a controlling interest in everything in France.
And of course, Xavier Niel has business associations with Havas, and Xavier Niel will be very happy that the Socialist Party has been reelected. We talked about this a little on Flep, that he has a real estate. He's a billionaire who owns this company called Free Mobile. Well, it's free. Then there is Free Mobile. There's free internet. There's free TV. It's not free, but it's called free.
It's very cheap though.
It is. It's not the cheapest though. I used to have it.
It has roaming in the United States.
That's
for
true.
Free.
No, yeah, I've used it. I actually used it when I visited the US recently. I bought a monthly, SIM for €20, and it was cheaper than US data. That's for sure. He got 40 gigabytes, I think. But he was in the bag for Gregoire, of course, because he didn't want Daddy to be reelected, because it might have called into question some of his business practices.
Marlon, I think we should just start with the fact, though, that as we mentioned on our Minitel series, Xavier Niel originally made his fortune off of early Minitel pornography.
Which is so strange.
Oh, okay. So he's morally degenerate, so he's worse than any other business.
or he's the image of the liberation of the late 70s, early 80s. He brought sex out of the... Yeah, he brought phone sex to the computer.
I feel like that's more seedy than like actual prostitution. Like it seems
the phone sex seems like the seediest thing there is.
Well,
almost.
I meant Minitel sex.
But it was basically phone sex. Like it was, you couldn't really have moving images on there.
There's a Roman Polanski movie with Hugh Grant. What's the title? I forget. It's like something Moon, Bitter Moon. I don't know if you've ever seen this.
No.
Peter Coyote and Emmanuel Segner, and Coyote is like this writer who becomes paralyzed, and he can only write in his apartment, and Emmanuel Segner plays his lover, but eventually she goes for like a younger man, and so he's just using Minitel in his apartment. It's all set in Paris. He's to to meet women, or I think to contact women. It's a good movie, actually.
Well, we'll have to do a movie episode.
For sure. Roman Polanski movies, yeah. Great filmmaker, I gotta say.
But sorry, Marlon, you were about to tell us how Xavier Niel has gone on to bigger and better things, and I'm not referring sexually.
Well, so to sort of understand the ubiquity of his presence in Paris, think of Westfield Mall. If you've ever visited Châtelet-Les-Halles, you might have had to go through the Westfield Mall. And it's not the only place where there's Westfield. They have it all across Paris. So he owns 26% of Westfield. He also owns Le Monde, Nouvel Obs, Télérama, and according to an article in QG Media, which is an alternative media, basically they pushed a lot of negative coverage, not undeservedly, of Dadi because, Niel wants to keep his good contacts with the city government. There's a guy named Jean-Louis Messica who's basically like Niel's right-hand man, who is also was the right-hand man for a while of Emmanuel Grégoire. He had to go up before the Paris's Ethics Committee and the National Financial Court over just some conflicts of interest on developing things. One of those vague things that we could explain more in depth, but it'd be boring. And yeah, he's a close friend of Xavier Niel and collaborated closely with Emmanuel Grégoire. So he'll be happy. I don't know, that fizzles out a little there, but the point is, there were powerful financial interests in Paris too that wanted the Socialist Party to win.
Right. The Socialist Party is, despite their name, which may confuse American listeners, they are not some radical party. Far from it. Speaking of which, I mean, they've been in. We're saying goodbye to Anne Hidalgo. Well, probably not. I'm sure she'll keep making herself known on the French political stage.
Maybe run for president again.
Yeah.
Actually, she wants to work for Bloomberg. She wants to run his philanthropy wing.
Oh, and of course.
Dear God.
And she will likely
that's probably more harmless it's less embarrassing for her and for France if she does that instead of running for president again, which was a disaster last time when she got
like 1.75%
of the vote.
Yeah, exactly.
Coming 10th. And she as the mayor of Paris and the candidate of the Socialist Party, which is supposed to be one of the main parties.
And she did particularly bad in Paris, too.
Yeah. So, but, what would you... She has been mayor for 12 years, since 2014. How do you rate her tenure? What are some highlights for you? Or lowlights?
I mean, I never really followed, Parisian municipal politics very closely. I think a lot of people have positive feelings towards her because of, greening Paris a lot and putting in so many bike lanes. Before she came in, obviously, there were cars by the Seine, which seems like inconceivable now that ever even existed. So I think she'll have left a positive impression on a lot of people's memory because of that. I know a lot of drivers around Paris hate her because of the same reason. Like a lot of the bike lanes, which are great, sometimes do make it difficult, and for drivers to get to certain places, it takes a lot longer for them to get around. Like, for instance, through Place de Concorde, it's really difficult to drive around there now, which is kind of the point. Of course,
have they finally put bike lanes in Place de Concorde?
No, but to get in there, there's one certain route where you used to be able to cut through.
I know what you're talking about. But Place de Concorde still is where I would put money on for a death on a bicycle in Paris.
I don't know. I biked there the other day and it seemed pretty good. The bike lanes, there's a whole ring of just bike lanes, which aren't close to the cars. But so I think obviously that'll stick in a lot of people's minds. That'll be her legacy. I think another thing though, which is undeniable, is rents have gone up so much in the time that she was mayor. Rents in Paris are completely unrecognizable. I didn't live in Paris, let's say, 8 years ago, but I remember looking at apartments, and they were so much cheaper than they are now. You could get a 1-bedroom apartment for like a 1-bedroom apartment, a nice little 1-bedroom apartment for like 700-800 euros, and that's gone. That's the price of studios now. So despite all these, the legacy that they try to claim of having vastly increased social housing, even though they have increased social housing, there's still a huge amount. The huge majority of people in Paris are paying huge rents, which they never paid before.
Yeah, I don't live in Paris, so I don't claim to know any better. But like, when I did live in Paris, I don't remember anyone liking Hidalgo. But again, I'm not plugged in. Because like, I always just think of the $84,000 she weighs, or euros she spent on her dresses or whatever.
My impression has been that she's had a very good publicity wing outside of France. She's gotten just continually good coverage in the New York Times. Somewhat for good reasons. Some of the nice things they've done with urbanism there, but she seems to have much more focused on that than on her internal popularity, which was, by the way, the same of the previous left-wing mayor of Barcelona, where I live, Ada Colau, who had a similar thing where she had a very good reputation abroad, very media savvy for the English language media, and yet within Barcelona, she became increasingly unpopular and lost at the last election.
Yeah, which makes sense given her next career move, which seems to be being involved in international philanthropy, or there was scuttlebutt that she wanted to get involved in UNESCO at one point, but I think she was far out of the running for the new leadership of UNESCO.
It seems to be. It makes me think of Pedro Sanchez right now too, who is getting such incredibly good press in English and not here in Spanish. And I also think that if he loses the next election, he'll be looking for some nice big international or EU post like this. This seems to be a common pattern for center-left politicians.
Well, all the technocratic urbanists love these Spaniards, don't they? I mean, like they have every urbanist who's like, oh, look, they built this.
They also love Hidalgo, though.
That's what. Oh, I mean Hidalgo, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Hidalgo, yeah.
Hidalgo specifically, and Sanchez even. Like, oh, look, they're like leftists who get things done. That's the whole spin on them. Which
I'm hearing from so many people here in Barcelona who hate the Socialist Party that runs our city, being like, oh, why can't our Socialist Party be like the Parisian Socialist Party that are so good? Yeah, because people here, and I'm constantly telling people, I actually do think the Parisian Socialist Party is a bit better than Barcelona's, but I'm telling people you're not getting the full story. You're getting their international press office's work.
But also, just like so there's some really good things that Hidalgo has done. I mean, closing the highway along the Seine, obviously that was necessary. Reducing the speed on the périphérique, great. But bike lanes, for example, like Paris is still a terrible student when it comes to doing them at all correctly.
Yeah, I'd lose my mind whenever I see some article talk about Paris as a super bike-heavy, bike-friendly city in the same sense as Copenhagen or Amsterdam. It's not true at all.
Rivoli, which is like the famous one that during COVID they like made much more bike-friendly, and they did. It still has the bike lane is designed around like a instead of having one lane on each side of the street, it's like a two-way bike lane, over-trafficked, and poor signalization.
Yeah, I think something like only 10% of Ile-de-France commuters use bikes, despite all the improvements. But now Gregoire, does he have a 7-year term? Is that right? Has that another change? I thought they were 6 years.
So it's 6 years, but most likely because the presidential election and municipal elections will both arrive at the same year. Because remember, listeners, 6 years for municipal elections and 5 years for presidential means that because the presidential election is next year, both terms will end at the same time. Therefore, elections the same year, and the presumption is that the municipal elections will be pushed back, and thus the current terms are 7 years. But it's not final. Which
will mean that at the end of Gregoire's term, the Socialist Party will have been in power for 32 years in Paris. They 25 years already. In Lille, where there were also really important elections, the Socialist Party won again, and they've been in power for 27 years. It was the first time since then that there's been a new candidate Martine Aubry was the longtime Socialist Party mayor. And it was a really fantastic election because the LFI came in second, the Socialists came in first, the Greens came in third. So there was never any doubt that the left was going to govern Lille. But the Green Party ended up allying with the Socialist Party, which was kind of strange because according to some people familiar with the process of the negotiation, 26 members voted to ally with LFI and 24 voted to ally with PS, but either the federation or the national level of the Greens cracked down and said, no, we're allying with the Socialist Party. So the Socialist Party won, but LFI got 35% of the vote in the second round, which is huge. And that was particularly egregious for Green voters, some of whom did end up voting for LFI because the Green Party has been in opposition in Lille for the past 6 years. And yet then they choose to
it's completely incoherent with their stance.
But thank you for bringing us off Paris like that. We were getting too Paris centric.
Speaking of the north, though, we got France, Roubaix.
Yeah, so this is like the big win, right, for LFI?
Yeah, one of them. There's Saint-Denis, of course, but Roubaix is
big
LFI.
Second round win.
For sure. Yeah, David Giraud, 55% of the vote in the second round. Roubaix is a city of over 100,000 people. I talked with him back in last February, when he launched his campaign. Giraud ran this campaign. And it's a shame, of course, for like their ambitions in the north that they lost Lille, because a really important structure in the north is the Métropole de Lille, which combines three cities, Roubaix, Lille, and Tourcoing. Tourcoing, the right one. Gérald Darmanin, who was the justice minister, previous mayor of Tourcoing, his candidate won. They ran the table. The two big cities, Lille and Roubaix, are very left-wing, but then after you go any further north and it turns into a bastion of the National Rally where they won elections in like places like Henin-Beaumont by 74% in the first round. They just completely run the table there. I think they have 12 of the 14 constituencies there in the National Assembly. But down in Roubaix and Lille, it's the left. And Giraud, for instance, talked about all these like things that he would do if they won, which I guess now they have won. Like for security, which is a big topic in France, you know, where I live, a right-wing mayor won and they promised to quadruple the number of municipal police. In Roubaix, one thing that they're going to do that Giraud said he was going to do was basically like, well, we're not in charge of fighting against crime. It's the national police who are. You know, it's the gendarmerie.
Which legally is true.
Yeah.
So mayors only have legally the responsibility, or the competence, in fact, for the prevention of crime. But they can't actually pursue crime once it's happened.
And, you know, and that fits exactly with what he said he would do. He said, for instance, what a local government would do would be fix broken doors. You know, in buildings, there are broken doors that haven't been repaired in 10 years. There have been elevators that haven't been repaired in months or years because the local representatives don't do their jobs. They don't use their power to intervene with the social housing bodies, which in the Métropole they are controlled at the Métropole level, not the city level. But, you know, they still have influence, municipal councils in the sense that they can put pressure.
Well, and also the Métropoles are stocked, or their representation is made up of people who are sent by the cities.
Yeah. So that 35% LFI in Lille could help Giraud in Roubaix, you know, handle social housing or, you know, fix housing. So yeah, that one thing he's going to do is like replace elevators, replace doors, obviously hire more inspectors to inspect buildings that are moldy. Mold is a big problem in Roubaix, for instance.
Especially in the north where it's just raining all the time. But we should do a whole episode, Liam, at some point on OPHs, or social housing bodies. Because it's a whole weird thing because it's gone through a lot of efforts of privatization. OPHs, or private housing, public housing offices, have always been these weird political organisms, definitely a place of a certain degree of corruption. It's a whole thing. We'll do an episode, but yeah, that's the end of my little parentheses there.
Yeah, and he also said, like, you know, that's a good point in the sense that there are so many different bodies or levels of government that control different, you know, things. Like, he pointed out that the city is only responsible for elementary schools in Roubaix. The middle schools are run by the department, and high schools are run by the region. But
this is true everywhere, by the way.
Yeah, but so he says, what I'm going to do for education is, you know, nutrition, local farms, that type of stuff in the canteens.
So that's the weird thing about how the schools work, because the city is responsible for the canteen. Like
even in the other schools, the high schools and the middle schools, you're saying?
No, it's just elementary schools. For elementary schools, it's the city that's responsible for it, but the actual education is done by the national level, right?
Right.
That's just like the weird thing of how this stuff works. And it's I could get into this on another episode, but it's very odd how the repartition between what's within an elementary school, what is the national system and what is like the locals to provide is quite weird. And they literally like have different, they often have like different like spaces for the teachers and for the assistants to the teachers, because that's one of the big things with like the national education getting worse. You have these assistants that are provided by the city in your elementary school who end up doing a lot of the teaching function. I mean, not officially, but like they end up doing like a lot of, you know, wrangling kids and all that stuff. It's all very weird.
Yeah, but I thought it was interesting talking to him like back, I guess this was actually March last year. When I talked to him almost a year to the day. It was on the 21st that we published it. Was that he was thinking about all this stuff, you know, obviously. I think that's sort of like a feature of a lot of these, and what of LFI, and what'll be interesting seeing them now with municipal power, because they have, you know, these developed programs and they get into these technical minutiae of governing a lot in, you know, reports and think tank conferences, but we've never actually seen them have a chance to put it into practice, except in Fâche-Tuménil, where I used to live, which had an LFI mayor, but that actually went to the right, which is a suburb of Lille. They moved to the right. They no longer have an LFI mayor, despite Roubaix and Lille, the performance in Roubaix and Lille by LFI. Giraud is also interesting because now he's going to sort of become a national political figure. I think another like feature of French political life is like the mayors of cities are national political figures, and they're invited on television programs. Giraud was already invited on a lot of programs. The mayor of Saint-Denis, Bally Bagayoko, who is a LFI communist candidate. There was an alliance between LFI and the Communist Party there. He has
Golden Alliance, as I call it.
He has also been, you know, on TV a bunch, and of course slammed by journalists who accuse him of, I guess, being black or something. Like I saw some meme that was like, why are you black? Like, why are you trying to divide the country?
Well, there was this whole clip of, because like the Saint-Denis is known as the city of kings for historical reasons, and in French, kings is roi. And so this journalist is like, oh, the city of roi, the city of noir, and noir means black people. Wow. Black. And so
that's the kind of thing journalists get paid the big bucks to come up with.
Exactly. And so of course everyone was like, what? You racist piece of shit. But that's not the only racist thing or like horrible thing he got. There was on the election night, people were, you know, really happy because, you know, LFI is, and the PCF as well is very like pro-Palestine, and also there's a lot of people in Saint-Denis who are concerned by the genocide that's still going on in Palestine. And so there was a bunch of people like, you know, who were celebrating his election, saying, you know, we are all children of Gaza or whatever. And of course, Apolline, one of these news show hosts, asks him, are you the, you know, like in like a very pointed way, like, are you the mayor of the people of Saint-Denis or of Gaza? And he goes like, And what's really great about Bally, I think in his own way, he's very like soft-spoken, intelligent, and reserved, but like in a way that works. Because normally I find that like in a PS way really distasteful, but in an LFI candidate, it's really great. And he's just like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, Gillot is sort of the opposite of that. He's already come out and said that he's going to be suing anyone who's insulting Roubaix.
Yeah. Probably a lot of people insult Roubaix, right? It's
the poorest.
But of a lot of jokes.
It's the poorest city in France. I think it has the highest immigrant population in France. If it's not Saint-Denis, they're close. Obviously a lot of Arab people live in Roubaix. It's often like a target in right-wing media for being an Islamicized city, which it's not. I mean, even if it was, like, whatever, but it's not. Like, I used to live in Lille, and I used to go to Roubaix often. It's connected on the same metro line, the Metropole. Everything is really close, and Roubaix's kind of nice. It has a beautiful mairie, city hall, great library there. I don't know, I haven't been around all of Roubaix. I'm sure, like any city, there's, like, dangerous places to go. But I've walked around aimlessly in Roubaix, not knowing where I'm going, without feeling in danger. Not that some people might not have felt. Some people might feel danger there.
No, you don't have to admit that many reserves.
But it's not. But it's not a constant. He
doesn't want to deny your experience, guys. Your truth, your lived reality.
Here's what Gillot said. This Friday, the Municipal Council of Roubaix will make me mayor of the city. I am listening attentively to the media comments and archiving everything. I will quickly set up a legal unit to take action against those who tarnish our city and its reputation. The North does not bend the knee to anyone. Roubaix will no longer stay silent. And there's been this whole thing, which is kind of like, if you hear it in French, it sounds less cringe, even though it's still a little cringe in French, where a lot of supporters of Roubaix, or a lot of supporters of Gillot, have been calling him the King in the North, which is a Game of Thrones reference, of course. But it provoked another like weird little television polemic where a rapper named Medine, who's supported LFI and has been accused of anti-Semitism, made a sort of anodyne post of him with Gillot saying the King in the North. It's clearly a Game of Thrones reference, unfortunately. And Gillot made a reference to that in his like election night speech. And on television, they were saying that here's another example of an anti-Semitic comment. They said that the King of the North is a reference to King David. I'm not sure how that is anti-Semitic, but that
sounds very like, Semitic.
Right? Wasn't King David king of the Jews? Am I wrong? I don't know my Bible very well, but I don't understand the logic at all. Even also, it was not a reference to King David in any way. Like, I guess David Gillot, but then still, how is it?
Who cares? There's no point in trying to understand these people. Like, for them, LFI is anti-Semitic, and God. But it's funny, actually. Just like as an aside, in my city, it's for once not LFI being accused of being Islamist. It's the PS that's accused of being Islamist, because the guy who the guy who's become a mayor of the city where I work is Muslim, and of course everyone's accusing him of being a communitarist, as they say in French.
I was reading about that story, like the King in the North stuff, and it reminded me of like some thing where there was an article in Liberation about him and his dad, Daniel Giraud, who was the PS mayor of Les Lilas for a long time. And it was this
a city in the Parisian region, by the way.
To the east, a suburb in the east, and right next to Paris. And the story was like, he was like, Daniel Giraud, the father, was disappointed in his son, and it was like this generational thing where the younger generation has been radicalized, and In the story, they claimed that Giraud had told them that he had been listening to like Alain Sorel and Dieudonné videos, which were, Sorel was like the classic nouvelle right figure. Dieudonné was like a comedian who became anti-Israel, but then dipped into anti-Semitism more so, and became like a little bit of a cultural phenomenon. And they quote him in this article saying that like he acknowledged having listened to these videos and said they were the only people talking about it. But after the article came out, Giraud was like, I never said that to you. And he said, send me the recording that you made of the conversation because I never said that to you. And the journalist claimed to have lost the recording, which was bizarre.
Shocking.
And he surely like sent me some text between him and the journalist, and the journalist is acting so defensive and weird in these texts.
Proof of innocence, if you ask me.
He completely he lied, like the journalist lied. I can't, I don't know. Like, well, if you say, we're saying like, yeah, I sometimes do some journalism, right? I don't delete any recorded conversations with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't delete
right, well,
anything.
you also probably don't misquote people.
Sure, but like also I would never delete.
But you said this is a journalist for Liberation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there you go. There's the problem.
I know.
I am not afraid to come out on this show and say Liberation is not where you find good news. At least not in the era that is ours.
Sure, but it's just like I always spiral out on like when journalists do things like this because why would you ever delete the recording? It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, because you lied and you don't want to get in trouble for defamation. Because one of the defenses for defamation is good faith, right? So if you have a stronger defense of good faith if you don't have the recording. Whereas if you do have the recording and it's obvious that you misquoted, there's obviously no good faith.
Let's move from Roubaix, which the big success of the second round for LFI, to what I saw as maybe not shocking, but a big disappointment for them, which was not winning Toulouse, and losing it pretty badly too.
What do they call it? Nominative determinism, right? They were always going to lose there. But no, that was somewhere where LFI came ahead of the socialists, and to their credit, the socialists allied with them, but they ended up losing 53 to 47%, I think was the first result. Maybe it's narrowed a little. But François Piquemal was the LFI candidate. Now, he technically got more votes than any other left-wing candidate in recent, say the past 20 years in Toulouse. Though as a percent, he underperformed in terms of percentage of some previous left-wing candidates. Another place the left lost, maybe not even LFI, was Bordeaux. Bordeaux was governed by the Greens, and it was a squeaker. The Renaissance-backed candidate won by something like 51 to 49, or even less, like a percent, 50
it's less,
something.
Yeah.
And
less
that was
than 2,000 votes.
And that was a surprising one because there was this liberal economist whose name I forget, who got like 20% in the first round of the vote, and he was adamant that he was not going to drop out. He was going to run in the second round. And that seemed to, the result of that seemed to have been that, or would have seemed to be that the left was going to win. But eventually at the last minute, he seems to have like allied with the Renaissance candidate, and Bordeaux went to the right.
This is big for Renaissance, right? I think this is the first major city they've won, right?
I think it's the only big city,
of
the big, so like the 20 big cities in France that they won. They may have David Lisnard. He may be joining, but who knows?
Is that what he's doing? So let's talk about that. Let's jump to the right and the far right. So Nice was the big thing for the far right. In the second round.
Do we talk about the pig on the last episode? Yeah, I think we did.
Eric
right?
Ciotti, we talked about him a bit. Yeah, he was.
But the other guy, his competitor.
I assumed he was the pig you were talking about.
Christian Estroy, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Where he intentionally got a member of his family to put a pig's head and hang it in front of his front door, so that he could go on TV and claim that he was anti-Semiticized.
The Côte d'Azur is fucking weird.
Estroy is also like Ciotti's enemy number one. They hate each other. They're political rivals par excellence. And after the results came out, Estroy, he announced that he would be retiring from political life. That was it. He was done.
Well, especially because this scandal with the pig's head was really embarrassing. By the way, I think we pronounce it in French Estrosi. Estrosi.
Yeah, I think it's Estrosi. I knew I was missing a syllable.
They're all Italians down there. Chotti, Estrosi.
Yeah, we're Saint-Denis, where I think 92% of the vote, or 93%, was for candidates of the left, including 7% for Révolution Permanente, the Trotskyist group, who has now, I think, 2 members on the municipal council.
Yep, that's right.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know how true it is, but I know that the accusation is that they only did well in Quartier Beauvau, like in nice neighborhoods. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I saw on posts.
And then you mentioned, David Lisnard in Cannes, which is a much smaller city, but their mayor, they've had as mayor forever, won by 81% in the first round, David Lisnard, and he's part of the Republicans. He's just announced that he's leaving the Republicans, and everyone seems to think he's going to run for president for some reason. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, it's just one of these political consequences of the municipal elections, that it does sort of like have things to say about the presidential election next year. Lisnard called for a primary of the right, all the way from Philippe to like Canafo, basically. So they want this primary of the government right, the right, like the economic right, the cultural right, the anti-immigrant right, and
but presumably excluding Bordella / Le Pen, right? Surely they have no illusions that she would,
everything
he
but
would participate in that.
The RN, which, a lot of their line is that they're left wing on economic issues, that they're almost socialistic.
The RN is too left for these guys.
So like Lisnard, that Cannes is a city of over 75,000 people, so that's kind of big. Lisnard is kind of a known figure, but there's a lot of people like him. There's like Xavier Bertrand, who's the president of Hauts-de-France, the region in the north, who beat the RN and the departmental level elections years ago, and he's a perennial would-be candidate. So there's Lisnard, there's Bertrand, there's Edouard Philippe, who is running for president. There's Bruno Retailleau, the president of Les Républicains, who is running for president.
Well, that was the really disappointing thing in Le Havre, right? Because Edouard Philippe, in the weirdest of terms, his promise was, if I don't win the mayorship of Le Havre, then I will not run for president. But if I win, I'll run for president. And which is weird because it means that if he wins the presidency, he obviously won't be mayor anymore. So people just maybe they voted for him to get rid of him.
I think the language he used was basically like, if I lose, the French people will have said had their say. If I can't win Le Havre, I can't win the presidential election.
But thinking it's the other way around, where if he wins, he can win the presidential election. There's a bit of a fallacy there.
Yeah, it's a small port city in the northwest of France is your definition of La France.
And also somewhere where he has been mayor for, he's been involved there for ever. How long has he been mayor?
Well, it was a big night for former and current prime ministers of France. Sébastien Lecornu, who used to be mayor of Vernon, he came in. He was third on the list there, and his list won the election there. Vernon is the town where Giverny is. Well, no, he's on the regional council or the departmental council, where Giverny is, and he's on the board of Giverny, which has Monet's Gardens there. But yeah, there's all these candidates of the right, and there's this fear on sort of the Macron-aligned right, or more broadly even the right, the LR right, which has aligned closer and closer with Macron in this second term, that they will have too many candidates and they will just be completely excluded from the presidential contest. Gerald Darmanin has been banging the drum about this for a long time. Of course, he also wants to run for president, so he may be banging the drum because he wants to be the candidate that avoids this fracture. And this
is my main source of hope, by the way, for the presidential election for the left.
Right. It seems like they're going to end up doing what the left has done several times, where, trying to do a primary, and then anyone who's actually got a shot doesn't participate in it, and then half the people who do participate in it ignore it and run for president anyway.
And you have the advantage that the PS, right, was completely decimated in the last presidential election, and there may be, we don't know, but there's the Communist Party is about to have their Congress or their thing. So who knows? They might shifts in the Communist Party might either result in them having no candidate. Let's hope for the presidentials, or maybe having a candidate. I don't know what's going to happen, but it does look like, at least for the moment, that we might have a beautiful coalition, not coalition, but panorama of right wing candidates coming into the presidential.
There's someone else who was also re-elected mayor, by the way, Fabien Roussel, the head of the Communist Party, is
first round.
He's mayor of Saint-Amand-les-Eaux, which is a pretty small suburb of Lille, looks like, or somewhere around Lille, somewhere up there north.
Somewhere in the north. And his his line in the PCF was always one opposed to continuing to support Mélenchon for president, because that's the other political consequence of the municipal elections. The PS is saying that the lesson is that in places where the PS fuses with LFI, like Toulouse, they have lost now. And in places where they've excluded fusions with LFI, like in Marseille or in Paris, they've won. So they say, okay, well, we can run candidates and win without LFI. LFI is not indispensable. LFI, of course, there's you can say there's evidence pointing to exactly the opposite. In Saint-Denis, they won in the first round because of their alliance with the PCF.
But that's precisely, anyway. I think, because despite the problems with the PCF in terms of ideological, basically Fabien Roussel being Fabien Roussel, ostensibly PCF and LFI are aligned ideologically. Whereas I do agree, a PS LFI alliance in most cases just doesn't work ideologically, and you do have PS people who refuse to ideologically support someone from LFI, and you have people from LFI who rightfully say that the PS are traitors.
Yeah, so it's all part of this positioning for the presidential election. I think, a lot of the media narrative on the night of the second round even, was the reverse of the night of the first round, because they move like a leaf in the wind. And for the first round, they said, LFI is here to stay. They've implanted. They're a force to be reckoned with. After the second round, it's like, oh, well, maybe, they're not as much of kingmakers as we thought they were. I haven't read Mélenchon's new blog, though his, takeaway seems to be that we, the LFI candidates and LFI as a party can win everywhere in France.
Yeah, especially considering they had basically no municipal representation anywhere before this. But, it is true that, despite these big LFI victories that we're talking about, and some flashy victories for far-right figures like Eric Ciotti, it's still the case that the vast majority of large cities in France were won by socialists or socialist-affiliated candidates who were, or Greens, or whatever, both of which are parties that everyone assumes have zero chance in the presidentials. When people talk about the presidentials, no one even is asking who's going to be the Green candidate, who's going to be the socialist candidate. It's just assumed they're not going to even be in the top 5 contenders. So,
well, the ecologists do already have, I believe, their candidate.
Who is it?
Marine Tondelier,
the lady with the vest.
Yeah. I think she already announced, right? Isn't that why she posted another Marine is possible on her social media a couple months ago?
Yeah, it was.
By the way, the joke there being
right,
but the joke being there that she's not Marine Le Pen.
My point being that, as before, the vast majority of big cities in France are dominated by the center-left, the socialists, and the Greens, basically. Despite these parties being almost irrelevant, well, I don't want to say relevant in national politics, but very far from from having any significant chances to win anything on the national stage. How do you explain that, Marlon? Like why does the Socialist Party continue to have such a strong, role in local elections, like the dominant role in local elections, while obviously being far away from anything like that nationally?
I guess it's partially explained by the fact that it seems like a lot of voters on the left do vote like based on what the useful vote is, and because municipal elections are less personalized than national contests, the useful vote is often viewed as, being the Socialist Party or the Greens. Like LFI could have done better in some places, like Paris in particular. LFI could have got a lot more votes in the second round and a lot more councillors if so many people hadn't thought it was necessary to vote for Gregoire, like we talked about earlier. I don't think the Socialist Party has any charismatic national figures. The Greens don't have any charismatic national figures. Marine Tondelier is like their maybe charismatic national figure, though she's kind of forced, I feel like, by the media. I think that sort of explains it. I mean, I know that's sort of like a very shallow explanation, but there's no one who drives conversation on the national level in the Socialist Party or the Greens or the Communist Party. The national conversation, and this may be like a reflection of, the media's priorities, or maybe just who resonates, is like Marine Le Pen, Mélenchon, and then the government. There's really no one else who the national media or the national conversation reacts to. And so then they become the candidates who represent, the various factions from whence they come.
Well, how about the good news that former brief Prime Minister Francois Bayrou, who was longtime Mayor Pau in the Pyrenees, or like by the Pyrenees in the south of France, southwest of France, he lost his mayorship, and he was also the guy who was involved in covering up some sexual abuse happening in Pau.
Yeah, nearby in the Betharam, which was a Catholic school. He was, I don't know even how long he's been mayor there, so it was a kind of an upset. But he was documented in a series of articles by Mediapart to have been informed of this, abuse, physical and sexual, at this school, which affected, dozens of students over the years, and basically not having done anything in his multiple, positions. I don't think he was mayor of Pau yet at the time, but he was head of the departmental council. He had just recently resigned from being the minister of education. So he had all these roles where he should have done something about it, and he never did. I haven't followed that election at all. I wonder how much that played a role in it. I don't know.
You would have to assume a big amount, because he's one of these, a classic type of French political figure, which is a guy who has a fief he's had forever in some small regional city. It's big to lose that.
Yeah, there was an unfortunate guy named Jean-Michel Baillet, who was re-elected sort of overwhelmingly and off investigation, who, full disclosure, I've been freelancing for them a little bit, but they put out a documentary that I did not work on, documenting allegations of, pedophilia and sexual abuse against him going back decades, which seems completely convincing. He's one of these radical party of the left politicians, which is a centrist party. But yeah, those allegations seemed completely plausible. It's in a 90-minute documentary. Baillet, notable child abuser, ? And he was unfortunately re-elected overwhelmingly, but they sort of his family sort of controls that area. It's one of those classic stories, really controls that area.
Yeah, just maybe some closing reflections. I still just think it's very interesting that you have this socialist domination of all the big cities. I mean, now Lyon's got a green mayor. That's a bit different, but I kind of see the Greens as being basically an almost indistinguishable party from the socialists. And if you compare it to here in Spain, 8 out of the top 10, even though Spain is run by socialists, unlike France, 8 out of the top 10 cities in Spain are run by the right, except for Barcelona and Las Palmas. And so I just find it kind of fascinating that this socialist grip on municipal France seems to have no end in sight. Yeah. Anything else you want to highlight, Marlon?
No, I mean that's an interesting. I guess like the actual answer to the question is that the majority of French voters are aligned with the Socialist Party. Like that's their ideology, right? That's even though there is a radical voting bloc in France, it's not the majority voting bloc in France.
And that you also get very little. The other party that's really struggled to get any foothold, I guess they have one now with Bordeaux, is Renaissance.
Yeah, despite almost a decade of being in national power, they have no implementation. And like you said, the Socialist Party dominance on one side, Les Republican. There's a lot of right-wing, mayors from the traditional parties, if not explicitly as part of like unions of the right, which are basically Les Republican. There's still this sort of alternates between Les Republican and the socialists. So Macronism, I think, like I'm not the first person to say it, but like it's left no impression, and the traditional polarization is coming back. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be reflected in the presidential election because LR and Socialist Party candidates seem to have no chance of making it to the second round. So there's like all these, there's like a retrenchment of forces at the same time as it's dissipating.
Yeah, maybe France is heading towards a Canada situation eventually where the parties that are relevant at a local and regional level are completely irrelevant at a national level and vice versa. Not
could
really.
Definitely be. No, but I mean, yeah, could be.
Anyway, thanks so much for coming on, Marlon. Everyone go listen to Flap 24. Anything else you want to plug, Marlon? Anything you're...
Just follow me on Twitter, Marlon Ettinger. Yeah, that's where you get everything. And follow the Royal Palace podcast. And that's all. What else do I plug for you? So follow the Royal Palace podcast. Follow their Twitter.
That's us.
Follow the Royal Palace podcast Twitter.
Subscribe to our email. That's what we're trying to plug.
Oh, subscribe to your email. You got a website. What's the website?
RoyalPalaceMedia.com.
Go to RoyalPalaceMedia.com and check out the interview or the episode that we did together, a crossover between Flap 24 and the Royal Palace podcast, The French Legal Experience. You can find that on RoyalPalaceMedia.com if you want to hear more of me and my co-host Ali from Flap 24. The French Legislative Election Podcast for 2024, 2025, 2026, and beyond.
Thanks, Marlon. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, everyone, for listening. See you next time.
Bye.
La France est une chose, à mes yeux, très considérable. Je me fais en effet de la France une certaine idée. Je veux dire par là qu'à mon sens, elle est quelque chose de très grand. Je me fais en effet de la France une certaine idée. Il y a même là quelque chose d'extraordinaire. Je me fais en effet de la France une certaine idée. Il faut que la France joue son rôle, c'est exact. Et pour qu'elle joue son rôle, il faut qu'elle soit la France.